Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My grandmother used to say that.
Oh, God.
Oh, okay, this is the April 23rd Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. I'm calling it to order. We have the agenda before us. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it's printed?
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have the minutes of March 26th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of March 26th?
So moved with spelling corrections.
A spelling correction.
My name.
And the vote?
Chuck did vote no.
Do we have support
Yeah, support for what?
for approving the minutes?
We're correcting the
Correction.
minutes right now, Jim.
Yeah.
What were they?
Spelling. Jim Budney's name was spelled wrong.
And I said, not everybody voted yes on that case.
He's
Oh, you're saying, okay. Okay.
Vote yes.
Okay, we had it, so the minutes should reflect that we had one dissenter.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting you, but
Yes, okay. All right.
Support? You waiting for support?
Yeah. Okay, so we have support now for the changes. All in favor?
aye.
Motion carries. Our first appeal is 19003. It's actually an appeal that we tabled last session, so I'm going to have Brian come up and recap what we've done. This is Mark Mills, 23509 West River, has applied for a variance to install solar panels that exceed the height requirements of the ordinance on lot 18 and 19 of Lewis D. Rucker's subdivision as recorded in Wayne County Records, Township of Grosse Ile, County of Wayne, Michigan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I will jump into this real quickly. We went over pretty much everything last month, but we do have a couple of people who weren't here, and we do have some modifications to the plans. So as you may recall, for those that were here, petitioner is seeking to install freestanding solar panels. Last month, the case was presented to you as a height increase above the maximum allowed by ordinance. Ordinance permits freestanding solar panels up to 4 feet in height. Proposal was for 2 such structures that were 9 foot 5 inches in height. The petitioner had asked, as part of the discussion after the public hearing was conducted, to be tabled, in essence, because they were making some changes to the plans. So from last meeting till late last week, we saw nothing. Plans were submitted after the agenda packets had gone out, so that's why none of you saw hard copies. When Lori got back to the office on Monday after the holiday, I believe they were emailed to you. So at least we have them, and I do have it incorporated into my presentation, though I did not have time to provide a full new review letter. So reality is most of my comments remain essentially unchanged from that review letter. However, what you will see on this new plan is that the petitioner has relocated the structure. So they've reduced it from 2 to 1, but this is a corner lot, and they've moved it into the Riverview Court front yard, whereas last month they were in the rear yard, which is the permitted location. So as is depicted by these current plans, they now need a second variance that was not previously part of the request. So take the plan for what it's worth. You can see it on the screen. So this is the proposed panel. This is Riverview Court down in this area, West River off to the left side. And then this is an elevation depiction, same height, so there's been no change there. We're still dealing with essentially the same structure, albeit it's a little bit elongated because they've taken what was previously proposed as 2 structures, and it's now down to a single structure, but it's one bigger structure, if that makes sense. We did actually, thanks to our newest member, Mr. Schweikert, he was able to get out, walk the site, take some photographs and sent them, so I tried to incorporate them into the presentations this evening. So you can see rear of house upper left, front of house upper right, and then you can see the heavily wooded nature of the rear yard in the lower 2 shots. So in terms of the ordinance, the same standards apply. So freestanding solar panels are subject to 19.23 paragraph B2. They're allowed only in the rear yard. They have to have 6-foot minimum side and rear setbacks, maximum height of 4 feet. There's a coverage limitation. All of the transmission lines have to be underground. They cannot be visible from adjacent property, and they have to be fully screened by landscaping wherever necessary. The plan before you this evening now seeks the same height variance we discussed last month. Now we have the addition of yard location. So there's the second variance now with the fact that they're pushing it into a front yard, which was not previously proposed. I would add that I guess if you were to pass this tonight, we would want to make sure we have some landscape and screening conditions, because these plans, I couldn't tell you whether this is going to be fully screened or viewed from off-site where it's proposed. My guess is it's probably visible from off-site. That's not allowed by ordinance. So, if you were so inclined to grant yard placement and height variances, they still will have to uphold the ordinance provisions related to the screening requirement. That would be my suggestion. All that being said, I still do not see a practical difficulty impacting the applicant's ability to comply. Sorry. That being said, Mr. Bailey has a question.
There's a glare component that says, I can paraphrase, the panel shall be placed such that reflected radiation or glare shall not be directed onto buildings or roadways. In fact, will this not impact the roadway?
It should not. I will defer that question to the solar panel person. They do, but the new solar panels really don't cast glare anymore. I'm going to let the technical person address that, but every solar panel I've seen in the last couple of years in every community I work with, they are now essentially glare-free. The way that they're designed, they absorb the light. They do not shine it back. But that is an excellent question. We do have a representative from the solar company here tonight, so I definitely think we want to pose that to him to make sure that my impression is correct.
And can you page down to the array dimensions? I believe when I looked at them, it gave a typical, not an actual, and if my calculations are correct, it came out with 358.5.
The 2 panels last month were right at, essentially at the maximum allowed.
And those are typical dimensions, so we're not sure what we're actually going to get?
Well, you'll have to ask the applicant that question. I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is what's shown and what the ordinance says, which is a 360 max.
Correct.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Again, in the absence of a variance that states otherwise, they have to comply.
Thank you.
Yep. So just continuing on, and again, a lot of this is redundant from last month, but so in terms of the lot itself, it's regular rectangular in shape. It exceeds the district standards for both width and area. In this case, again, I fail to see anything unique or unusual about the property that could be used to support a variance. In the absence of a practical difficulty and or a unique circumstance, it's really hard to make a statement that the substantial justice test or the fairness test is being met. So I find really I have three pretty major concerns about this request. As we discussed last month, they could look for a different solar panel model that's not as tall, that's not in this location. I know that we discussed the idea of the roof mount and the building mount. Those are options. The petitioner did acknowledge last month there are some issues with the roof-mounted structures in terms of how much energy they could actually generate from those. I believe the original submittal, the quote was that they would not get full production, but that to me does not, again, in and of itself, lend itself to a variance. I have the new concern about the front yard placement. There are 3 residences, at least, I don't have a good depiction of exactly where this is in relation, but eyeball test tells me it's somewhere over here. And, I would have to question whether that all of a sudden now becomes somewhat impactful upon the neighbor. Whether, again, we do have the standard about it has to be fully landscaped and not visible from off-site views. So if they uphold that, potentially then it's not visible from that house across the street. But the whole purpose of the ordinance, the way the regulations were written, we expected much smaller structures in much more appropriate locations.
Again, this
what's presented.
Brian, again, the emphasis being that it is a front yard,
Correct.
not a side or a back.
Correct. Yep. And we did get into that conversation last month as well. And I thought I was pretty clear in explaining the front yard of a corner lot, but apparently there was a little miscommunication there, or not. I don't know, but it is what it is. So the end summary again is there's the potential for impact to the neighboring properties now, which I really didn't think so before, provided there was screening, provided it was in proper locations. If it's hidden away in the backyard, probably doesn't impact the neighbors. All that being said, the primary test is practical difficulty and that there's a unique circumstance in support of it. And in this case, I really don't believe a variance should be granted in the absence of those conditions. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Unless you have any questions of Brian, anybody have any questions for Brian? No? Okay, thanks, Brian. Can we have the petitioner here, Mr. Mark Mills? Got name and address?
Mark Mills, 23509 West River Road.
And you're, I guess you've got an associate there?
Yes, this is the sales representative for Power Home Solar.
Yes. My name is Saad Newman with Power Home Solar. Thank you for having us tonight.
Okay, Mark, you want to give us a review of what we heard you last month, and basically what I see is the same as we saw last month, with the exception of the panels being combined into one panel, a straight line panel, and then the relocation. So what we see is more variances than we saw last time.
Okay, well, we can have this moved back.
Yeah, that's
that part won't be an issue. But if I could, I'd like to have Saad speak on the side of the technical side of things, why it's going to work, why it's not going to work, things of that nature. That's why he's here.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
The reason that we proposed a ground mount system versus a roof mount system, the resident of the home is facing east and west. The roof lines are facing east and west. Regarding solar, they are most productive when they're facing south. Also, with the if you had the pictures of the homes, the backside and front side, you'll notice that there was a lot of trees surrounding the home, and there's a lot of shading that's also on top of the roof. So again, just like oil and water don't mix, shade and solar do not mix, and that's why we came up with a proposal for our ground mount system. As far as the positioning of where they are right there, they will be mounted on a polling system. We can easily move that back a couple of feet if it's if there's an issue with the what's the word?
The side front yard, I guess.
The side front yard, yeah. I mean, we're only talking about a couple of feet. We just lined it up with the existing shed that's there right now. We can easily move that back a few feet if that's all that. Now that's a concern, but That is the only reason that we're going with a ground mount proposal versus a roof mount proposal, because of the production purposes. And it's just east and west. Even though they will still get solar production, it's not productive enough because of the way that the solar is designed. If we face them south, and as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, you're getting the full exposure all day long, which is the most productive area to put them in. As far as the height of the panels, our ground mount system is set up where the low end of the system, once they're placed together as an array, the low end of the system would be about 2.5 feet off the ground, and the high end is off about 9.5 feet high. I did talk to the engineers, asked them if there's any way we can lower that a little bit. They said they can tilt the angle just a little bit, but it wouldn't be more than maybe a foot and a half lower if we just, change the angle. Because right now they would sit at a 30-degree angle facing 180 degrees due south is what our proposal is currently. I don't know if I've answered all the questions or.
So what I'm hearing is that the height remains the same from the last time you made the presentation. You haven't made a change in that.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions of?
I have a question.
John?
I see 6 things on my screen that tell me why this should not be approved.
Okay.
Tell me why this should be approved from your perspective.
Well, as far as being approved, I guess the issue is the ground mount versus the roof mount. I mean, when we look at our proposals, the roof mount system, as hard as we try putting them on the roof, they were not going to be productive enough to the point where we would have to put more panels on the home because it's facing east and west. And obviously, cost-wise, it would be very much, more than twice the amount for price-wise. And as far as production, it just wasn't going to be efficient for Mr. Mills.
So instead of having something that gives you less power, you're asking for all these variances in order to get whatever power level you want. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. The only we're just doing the only options we have would be a roof mount or a ground mount. We put a lot of ground mount systems, and a lot of we've got over 11,000 systems up and running, and about half of them are ground mount systems. They do work on the ground. That's why we proposed it that way.
Let me follow up. You're at a bit of a disadvantage because I helped write that ordinance as to how solar panels were to be on this township. That complies to virtually none of them, height-wise, location-wise. Okay, did you review our ordinances before you came here?
Don't know if our permitting department reviewed them. I did not know.
I would say, obviously, based on the results that you're presenting to us, the answer is no. Further, I would ask, why when I go out there and I go to look and see, where is this? Okay, first of all, there's no stakes in the ground. That is an ordinance requirement, so that anybody going out there and having a look sees for themselves exactly what's going on. You didn't do that. Second thing. Okay.
That happens at the tail end of the process.
Sir, please let me continue.
Yes, sir.
I am used to seeing, from my prior zoning board of appeals experience, that the applicant will write down the individual items, the 6 or 7 items that Brian went through, and he will explain point by point why that doesn't apply to them. Okay, you didn't do that. Third thing, okay, I absolutely object to having a plan submitted to me, and I get it at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, or basically Tuesday morning. Okay, if it were up to me, you would have not even been on the agenda, because you failed to provide the basic materials that are required in our ordinance. And then when you submit a plan, the plan is woefully deficient. I will absolutely not vote for this. That's my statement.
Okay, John, do you have another Linda?
Yes, I just had 2 questions.
Yes.
I was wondering if Mr. Mills could tell me how long he has owned this residence.
We've owned the residence since the 21st of December of last year. We've occupied it. I started renting it from the previous owner as a rent-to-own last June or July of last year.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask, last meeting there was a neighbor here. Yeah. Did they get notification that Mr. Mills would be back?
They're here now, Linda.
Oh, okay then, fine. I would just say that I drove by there today, and I know you've only owned it a short time, but I wouldn't want to be the neighbor on Riverview Court across the street from this. No matter how much you try to block it out, I just think 9.5 feet up is terribly high.
Can I respond to that? I did speak with some of the neighbors, and there's really no issue. The only issue is the neighbors to the north, which would be the Pfeiffers. They're the only ones really have an issue with it from who I've spoken to. So, but I understand what you're saying, and we would screen it in. That part wouldn't be an issue. They're going to see in green. They're going to see foliage. You're not going to see these panels.
We also took in consideration put them on as a roof mount. With the trees, we would have had to cut down quite a few trees to get the exposure, and that was one of the things that we considered. Mr. Mills says he was not interested in cutting down any trees, so that's why we went with a ground mount system also.
Jim?
Yeah, Jim?
I have, and I think a lot of what John was saying really should have been directed to Mr. Mills because it's his application. But I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
For us to give a variance, there's a list of items in 23.5B. Can you go through those and tell us why you feel a variance is necessary? Not, well, I'm talking to Mr. Mills because I don't know that you know our okay.
Can I see the list when we go through the list? I don't have it in front of me.
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean,
yeah.
you know,
No, that
is,
in fact, what you're here for. Is
No, I
to do that,
understand that
not
too,
to.
but
what we're
the
hearing right now.
things was from the solar panel company that was
Yeah,
supposed to present
yeah.
it because I'm not the technical guy on the solar side.
Yeah, and I understand, and what we're getting, the message we're getting is we want to do this because to make this work rather than what you're supposed to be addressing, which is the items in order for us to give you a variance, and you're not telling us that. You're not giving us that.
Basically, if I understand correctly, if it's not mounted in this way, it will not work efficiently. It's not going to work, basically.
I understand that.
That's why, I mean, this is the product that they have. I can't tell you why it's got to be 9.5 feet tall. I don't know.
Well, it's because that is the ordinance. It's got to be, the ordinance is 4, and you want to do 9, you have to tell us why the ordinance should be varied, and other than just because you don't feel it'll work is not going to be enough.
Not about how I feel about it. Is I'm being told it won't work.
Well, no, and that will not be enough.
Okay.
I mean, if I look at this list right where it says rear yard only, obviously, if we just moved them back a couple more feet, that should be suffice for that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, again, we don't have really a very good drawing, quite frankly. I think it's more than just a couple of feet, personally. You show a 10-foot setback, and it needs to be, the front yard is established by the home placement in relation to the roadways. So it needs to be farther away from Riverview Court than is the nearest point of the residence.
Our proposal showed we lined them up to the shed. We thought the shed was fell into in that category.
It has nothing to do with yard.
Okay, all right. But as far as the height, we can't really adjust it by 5 feet. We can't really do anything with that. All the lines are underground, obviously. There's nothing going to be exposed. Everything will be trenched right back to the meter. And as far as being visible, discussed it with Mr. Mills. He's already talked about putting some arborvitae trees in front of the panels to offset some of the visible aspect of the project. I don't know, that covers everything right there. I think that's what we're talking about, right? As far as the size, I think you asked a question, sir, about the size of the panels.
And we can get into that if you want.
Sure. I mean, the panels are 3 feet by 5 feet each, so they're going to be approximately taking an area of 10 feet by...
You've stated that the angle is 30 degrees.
Yes, sir.
I think your drawing shows 35. I thought the rule of thumb was it has to match the latitude, and I believe we're 40 to 45 degrees here.
Our ground mount systems are set up for a 30-degree pitch with a 180-degree azimuth.
Well, so you may not be as efficient as you think then. And if they're changed to 45, the sine of 45, 1.1 over 1.44.
It'll make them higher, wouldn't it? Before you went to a 45-degree angle?
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
So it changes the height.
It makes it worse.
It makes it worse, correct.
Yes. So it may not be as efficient as you want, and if you made it more efficient, the conditions would be worse. Am I missing something?
We set up our ground mount system at a 30-degree angle. I mean,
But that's not consistent with industry standards, is it? Shouldn't you be matching the latitude?
I honestly cannot answer that question for you. I would have to take that back into my engineers and ask them that question. I'm
I
sorry.
would suggest you do that. We've had these before, and we do have some experience with this.
Are there any ground mount systems in Grosse Ile? I mean, that
Roof
tells me-
mounts,
Okay, can we, I'm getting the idea that there's a lot of questions, and we could spend all night trying to get you to answer them, but I'm not sure that you're prepared to answer them. So unless we have some more questions here from the panel here, do we have anybody else?
I think we're ready.
Do we have anybody in the audience that wants to speak to this issue? You want to come up and and name and address?
Before I leave, can I ask one question? I just want to clarify, are there any ground mounts on the city of Grosse Ile that you're aware of? Any ground mount systems on the city of Grosse Ile or on the township of Grosse
Could you
Ile?
speak?
Are there any ground mount solar panel systems within this township that you're aware of?
Are there any? I don't. You'd have to ask Lori.
I haven't seen any. I've seen the roof.
We have 0 ground mounts in the township. I mean, we're basically, because the question came up about other ground mount systems, and Sad brought that up as well, but we have nothing to really compare to in this township, correct? 'Cause no one else has.
But what you have to compare with is the ordinance. You got to go to the ordinance.
I understand that. So if I want to look at another ground mount system on the township, see what they did, to try to copy that, if it's been approved, I can't do that, correct? Because there's nothing here on this
And
township.
until you can meet the ordinance, then you have difficulty.
That's not the question.
No, there is no system that we're aware of.
Okay.
And I know in the 6 years I've been on this board, we haven't looked at any. So I would say there probably isn't one on Grosse Ile for you to look at.
Thank you.
but we wouldn't know if they met the ordinance, there'd be no need to come before the ZBA.
Correct.
So, to our knowledge, there's none, but that doesn't mean there are none. You would have to check with the building department.
Yeah, that basically. So, are you through?
I am, yes.
Okay, can we have somebody in the audience that wants to speak to this?
West Pfeiffer, 23477 West River Road. As I said before being on the mic, that I think the board...
Speaking this loudspeaker.
Is this going now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The board has already addressed its inadequacies very well. I guess my only 2 questions will be this, is the green belt along Riverview Court, which is Wayne County property, putting it in that location will require cutting down those trees. And I don't see how that benefits anything. Again, then you got the view on Riverview Court, and if you're cutting down trees and then putting up arborvitaes to try to block it, and they're that close, that sounds pretty inefficient. Then the last thing is, isn't this, would we consider another structure? And how many structures are you allowed in the backyard?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, there's an accessory building in the rear yard. This is an accessory structure.
Pardon?
There's an accessory building in the backyard. This
Yes.
is an accessory structure.
Yes.
You're limited to one accessory building. So this does not impact, there's not a variance needed for the structure itself.
Okay.
This is an issue of not complying with the solar standards for height and yard location.
Okay, do you have any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I think we're in a position to vote. So can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny appeal number 19-003, as there is not a showing that the standards for a variance as outlined in section 23.5B have been met.
Second.
Okay, we have support. Can we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion carries. Appeal. The appeal 19-003 is denied. Okay, let's move on here to the next appeal. We have appeal number 19004. Mr. John Serb of 28180 Elba has requested a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals for the covered patio/porch, which encroaches into the average shoreline setback on part of Lot 44B and 45A, sub of Elba subdivisions. Mr. Serb, what we're going to do is we're going to have Brian, our consultant here, come up and give us an overview, and then after he gives us the overview, then you can come up and give us your reasons that we should accept the variance, okay? Okay, Brian.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. All right, let me get this presentation in line. Okay. Next case, 28180 Elba Drive. It's a waterfront lot on the west side of Elba. This is the subject property here. If you can see the mouse cursor, the arrow, this is the home. It is zoned R1B, as are the surrounding properties. The request before you specifically is a covered porch / upper level balcony in the waterfront side of the property that slightly encroaches into the average waterfront setback. Pertinent sections. This computer's really acting up tonight. Pertinent ordinance sections include section 3.5, which identifies the average waterfront setback, as well as 19.6, which identifies certain permissible encroachments, which I will address momentarily. So I do apologize for the poor quality of this photograph. I need John to take all my photographs, apparently. I had to take this one because I didn't have digital, there weren't PDFs of the file available. So if you can bear with me. So I'm outlining the property boundaries, essentially, with the cursor. This is the existing residence. They are proposing a modest addition on the street front side, has no issues with any dimensional standards. A larger addition on the waterfront side, which has no issue with dimensional standards. And then we have this hatched in red area here, which is the lower level patio, upper floor balcony, which creates essentially a covered porch on the waterfront side. Now, to make it even worse, I know you really can't see it on the screen, but this dashed line that I'm trying to keep a steady hand over is a replication of essentially where the township and builder and owner came to an agreement that this is about the best we could come up with for the average shoreline setback. I do have an aerial that better depicts it, but this is the replication of that line on plan form. So I felt like this was the better plan to show you first, so that you could see in actuality what was happening. So if you could actually read this, you would see that it's just under 2.5 feet. It's 2 feet 4 inches at its max encroachment, because it does run on a bit of an angle. I guess it would be the southerly portion of this structure is compliant. It's really just this northwest triangle that's a few feet long by a maximum of 2 foot 4 inches deep. So it is relatively modest encroachment, but it is an encroachment nonetheless. I can go back to this if we need to talk further too. So this is the proposed elevation view of the waterfront side of the house. So this is the larger addition here. And then this really is why we're here tonight, is this guy right here, with this, again, creating a covered porch for the lower level with the upper floor balcony. And what I was trying to show in that picture was that it's basically, this is the corner of max encroachment. And then as you work your way a few feet into the house, at some point in here, it becomes compliant. So because it is on an angle, so it's really only, again, this kind of triangle shaped section of encroachment. hopefully that helps. But so this is the aerial photo that we used at our first meeting when we met with the contractor on this project. And so what you see happening is kind of it's really difficult to identify a highly accurate average waterfront setback line. The shorelines aren't always even. Two, the homes are a little askew from each other. So we did kind of look at the idea of a few homes in each direction, trying to come up with this sort of point of no crossing, if you will. We felt it was pretty much in line with the home to the south. It just so happens that the home to the north is a little bit closer to the road than many of the other homes, or at least it's farther from the shoreline, if you will. And that was really kind of what caught my attention as far as the concern of this encroachment. The additions on the waterfront side are essentially in line with or not even visible from the home to the south. And the whole idea of the average shoreline setback is to try to keep things in line so we have open waterfront views and you don't build a house 30 feet behind everyone else and disrupt their views. So the real reason we're here is kind of because of the potential impacts to this neighbor by this, again, relatively modest encroachment, but I didn't feel comfortable with it as was drawn, nor did staff. We did feel that ZBA was the appropriate body to hear this request. So again, Mr. Schweikert, kind enough to take some photos. I think a couple of the key points I want you to take away, and I should have pointed this out on the plan. I'll go back in a moment. You can see there is some side yard vegetation between the two homes. The upper left and lower right really do kind of show that well. The aerial, unfortunately, it was a black and white copy, but you can see at full bloom, there's a lot of vegetation in there, and then many of these trees obviously will kind of block the view of this to a degree anyway. It is on the plan as well, so the large treed or wooded area in that northerly side yard is represented on their plan. Probably will have some good screening impacts in terms of mitigating the slight encroachment. So, yes, sir, of course.
Lower slide on the right.
Yes.
That's the picture from the neighbor.
This is north looking south from, going the wrong way. So that would be a view from this property looking south towards our subject site, which is right here. Hopefully that made sense.
The picture to the left is looking north.
Yep, so this,
In the yard, and you're looking north, that's what you see.
and then again, so you see the vegetation, and even in the background you can see the canopy trees that aren't quite at bloom yet, but I'm sure they're getting closer every day. Hopefully it keeps warming up. With respect to ordinance provisions, so footnote 4 of section 3.5 is establishes the average waterfront setback. I mentioned at the outset that 19.6 has some permissible encroachments. There are some elements like uncovered, unenclosed porches, bay windows, overhanging eaves. There are certain features that are allowed to project into required yards. In this case, the covered porch / upper level balcony is not an allowable encroachment into a waterfront setback. So again, those two sections in combination are really why we're here tonight. And as I noted earlier, tried to show you on the plan, so at its worst case on the site plan drawing, it's a 2-foot 4-inch encroachment at that northwest corner of the proposed balcony / covered porch. So that's the real issue there. All that being said, overview of my review. So this is another one of those instances where it's pretty modest request. That being said, I really don't see a practical difficulty that restricts the applicant from complying with the ordinance. The lot width and lot area greatly exceed the minimum standards of the district. It's generally rectangular in shape. It's not a perfect rectangle, but we're not dealing with a pie-shaped lot or anything really unusual to that effect. My standard comment, in the absence of practical difficulty and unique circumstance, granting of a variance really wouldn't be deemed fair, which is failure to meet the substantial justice test. And in this case, I do think that there's a pretty reasonable alternative, and that is just simply to slightly reduce the size of this particular structure. Even if it were redesigned with a slight jog in it to match that angled setback line. I don't know design-wise how great that is, or if the builder would be super happy about that. But, it's at 12 foot 4 inches off the face of the house. It's a pretty good sized upper level balcony / covered porch too. So, 2 feet 4 inches, in my opinion, it does not seem unreasonable as an alternative simply to scale it back a little bit. All that being said, I did show you the vegetation. We showed you the photos. Really don't believe that there's going to be any neighbor impact, land value impacts, public safety impacts. Don't really foresee issues with any of those other issues. But again, my closing point is, in the absence of an actual practical difficulty, a variance still should not be granted, even if it doesn't harm a neighbor. We still need something in terms of your review standards to latch onto that would support a variance. That's all I have at this time, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, board members, Brian, the owner, I have a business relationship with the Boardman Company in the interest of full transparency. I also have a friendship with the Boardman extended family. In the interest of full transparency, if anyone on the board or the applicant feels I should recuse myself from discussion and voting, I'll be glad to do so, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'd like to know how the applicant feels about that.
Yeah, that's fine. Personal relationship is fine. Item of concern.
Yeah, because I talked to John Serb a number of times about financial concerns too, but I've never been into a legal contract with him or anything like that, so I don't feel that I should recuse myself from that. So Gary, my feeling is that if the applicant has no feeling about any impropriety here, I don't certainly have any. Does anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, standard practice with this, when this issue comes up at the Planning Commission, is a motion is made and seconded either to abstain or to waive the restriction, and then everybody votes. So it's public and it's in the minutes.
Okay. Thank you, John. So let's get a motion here. And do we want a motion for both of us, or?
It needs to be a motion one direction or the other. Either that he needs to abstain for the reasons that were listed, or that he doesn't need to abstain, and everybody needs to take a vote.
I would make the motion that neither the board chair or the member need to abstain.
Support. Okay, so we have support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, you're all set, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay, let's continue on here. So, Brian, are you through with your?
I am through. If you're through with me.
Okay. John, do you want to come up and give us your reasons for us to accept the variance?
Okay. Hello and good evening, the Zoning Board of Appeals. As a lifelong resident graduate of Groseal High, current taxpayer and owner of 3 properties here on the island, and most importantly, a father of 4 raising 4 children in this community. I sincerely thank all of you for everything that you do, past and present, on the zoning board. This is a wonderful community. I'm a very, very strong advocate for this community, and as I said, raising my family here. So thank you for that. As expected and appreciated, we're reviewing the potential variance to permit a covered porch which potentially encroaches into the average shoreline setback of Elba Island. I, along with my neighbors, feel the porch is within the boundaries of the shoreline setback and have provided substantial documentation in front of you today. It is the intent to review this information, ensure continuity on the location of the porch relative to the average shoreline setback. Enclosed in front of you, I've provided 2 packets. The first is the consent of my direct neighbors to the north and south, voicing no concern over the subject porch. In addition, I provided 6 letters from immediate neighbors, of whom which were used to formulate what we would know as the average shoreline setback. All 8 of the potentially affected residents support and are in favor of the aforementioned location of the average shoreline setback. The second document I've provided, which has the photo of the home or the rendering, a little more color to the project, shows 3 lot line variables. And as Brian mentioned, and we haven't actually had the opportunity to meet, nice to meet you, thank you. This is why we're here today. And as I said, I think it's completely fair and reasonable under Brian's authority to want to have this discussion with the board and understand and review all of the comments of the community. It is in our opinion, when I say our, the residents of Elba Island and everyone who has signed that letter, the subject of the subject porch does not protrude beyond the average shoreline setback. And we are seeking agreement with the location on where the average shoreline setback sits and or a variance which we deem as fair and reasonable in the spirit of the ordinance. So this is sincerely John Serb and my Elba Island neighbors.
Okay, John, so actually, when you are concerned about the average shoreline setback, I know it's not an exact science, and given that it's not an exact science, looking at your the amount of the structures into the what we see as the average shoreline setback is not that great. As Brian was saying, it's kind of minimal, 2 foot 4 inches or yeah.
2.4 feet.
Yeah, that too. That too.
2 feet 4 inches.
Yeah.
So.
On the, yes, thank you, Jim. On the second document I provided with the rendering of the house, if you go to, I believe it's the 3rd or 4th page, it is the first Google Earth image of the lot lines. And to Brian's point, even if I can toggle back on his presentation here. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. This drawing that is currently, okay, just going to pull this one up. Perfect. So the highlight I was going to make mention of this point is the way the contractor provided this lot line was simply by a ruler and a marker, and that is...
Brian, we're getting nothing. I'd suggest turning it off and turning it on again. Now we're talking.
Perfect. Okay, so Lisa allows us to see a little clearer. And everyone should have a copy of this, but this is the first aerial view of the property. That red line there is what I would consider as a neighbor and someone who has lived in this property for 33 years and know this property better than anyone on this island, is the average shoreline setback. And that goes from Charlie Lawler's house all the way down to Pat Missler's house, and including 3 houses in between. And that red line there represents the average shoreline setback. What you do see clearer than you can on the screen here today is the little yellow line. This is done electronically through Google Earth, which is actually more accurate than trying to scale a red marker off of a picture. And so because of that, I deem that this is more acceptable and more accurate when trying to find how far the existing porch protrudes from the property, or excuse me, the proposed porch protrudes from the existing property.
May I ask a question, sir, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Okay, you're talking about something yellow on here? I don't see
Yes, sir.
anything.
Do you mind if I?
What am I looking at?
If you look on yours, they just took the first one right there.
That little sliver right there is
That's the difference between the house and the lot line.
Okay, you did not superimpose a new porch in there. This is the way it is today.
Correct.
Now I understand. Thank you.
And just to rectify that, 12-foot, 12.47 is the footage using satellites is the measurement of the porch.
Good.
Or of the shoreline setback.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Yeah. Go ahead.
You failed. If you want the true line, you would survey this. You haven't done that. You've relied on Google Earth.
I've surveyed the property.
I know, but you didn't survey. This line wasn't placed in by a registered land surveyor.
Completely agreed. And to that point, the reason we're here today for the variance is because the red marker that the township and the contractor came to was not a surveyed line.
I don't doubt that for a minute.
Mr. Chair, may I pose a quick question? Yeah, Mr. Serb, is the yellow post in this drawing, is that the post that was on site in the photograph earlier? Is that actually physically on site? Because one of the photographs I thought had a yellow stake.
It had you're right. But
yes, I believe,
Okay.
and I have to be very honest with you, I believe so. I don't know
Understood.
what picture we're referencing.
Here,
but-
let me.
Yeah.
One sec, let's.
Yeah.
There's an orange stake on the property.
We've got the technology. Let's try it.
Yeah.
And I saw it when I made my inspection.
What it wants to work.
There.
That's what I.
Unfortunately, no, that is a shovel. However,
that wasn't.
if you look very closely at my cursor, I did with copper piping, and it since had fallen out due to the rain over the Easter weekend. This piece of copper was what was to be deemed acceptable, and this is what we deem to be the actual. This is the 12-foot mark. This is what we would say is the shoreline.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if that was actually. I didn't realize it was a shovel. My apologies.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Looking at the drawings, I'm looking at the drawing of the second floor, where there's a dimension on, it says concrete porch on the right-hand side, and a dimension which runs, that's the first floor, I'm sorry, runs out 12 feet, 8 1/4 inch. Okay, that's the base, I assume. When I look at the upper floor, it's 11 feet, 3 inches. For the balcony width, looks to be 11 feet, 3 inches. Okay, and that's on top of a structure down below, which is 12.8.
Yeah, you would maybe know better than I. I don't know if that's just if that's the column line of the balcony stair railing. That I can't comment on. I think more my concern was the shoreline setback.
Yeah, well, my point here was that Brian indicated that the second floor was also in variance, okay, and by that 2 feet 4 inches, and if the distance is only 11 feet 3 inches, then it's not 2 feet 4 inches variance, it's 1 foot. But I was trying to understand what this
It's a fair
The
question,
numbers work.
John. It's a very fair question. If you want me to try to solution
No,
it or
that's
look
okay.
at it.
No, I just thought you might know offhand. It's okay.
Are you okay, John?
I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Stay with that drawing, A104. The patio, for lack of a better term, the at-grade concrete porch is 12 feet, 8.5 inches, if I'm reading that right.
Correct.
Yep.
And the columns are 6 foot, what is that, John?
6 foot.
6 foot. Correct?
Yeah.
But the drawing, or the rendering,
Are you talking, Gary, that picture? Keep in mind that picture is given by the contractor as an image. Yes. Yeah, that is not something that has been submitted to the city and was simply provided tonight to just give you a feel for what is taking place. It is not, if you notice, there's black shutters and an uneven window. We wouldn't allow that to happen.
okay, so the location of the column that I'm looking at on what you've labeled A3 is fictitious at best. It's somebody's idea.
It's correct.
It's
a
may not be accurate.
pictorial.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bogus. It just may not be accurate. Thank you. Oops, sorry.
Okay, John, you have anything else that you want to address?
On that document that I provided, there were 2 other aerial renderings, and they looked at 2 different variables. And part of the average shoreline setback, right, is we do need to, as a community, come together and make sure it's fair and reasonable and in the spirit of the ordinance. The first drawing that you looked at, we just discussed, the aerial Google rendering, was the most stringent scenario. If we slowly start to stretch this line out and look at more houses down the block, the average shoreline setback actually becomes more and more into my favor. And in designing this property, I specifically left that as an open-aired porch out of the courtesy and respect for the people around me, or else we would have enclosed that and made that living space. But it was not the intent to make it more difficult for other residents. So it was the foresight ahead of time to make that an open-air porch.
Yeah, well, and that's nice consideration, yeah. Okay, we have any other questions from the board?
Just one, John. Would you have any problem maybe stepping that out instead of straight across? If in fact, if we agree that line is the line in the plans where there is a variance needed versus this where I assume there wouldn't be a variance needed. If there were, would you? It seems like you could still do your porch, your upper balcony, and be a little, draw it back on that corner, go over, and then back out. Obviously, the aesthetics aren't there, but that unfortunately is not necessarily one of our
your requirements.
Okay, John?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Brian. Brian, would you put the picture, the Google of all the houses that are lined up there? I have a fundamental question.
This one?
No. Yours. Your presentation. Okay. Now, I'm looking at the house that's marked at the site. Okay. The reason this whole thing has come up is because these houses aren't lined up consistent with the shoreline. Now, my question to you is, if this house were put in today, where would that house be? Would it be forward? Would it be back? Where would it be?
Well, they certainly have room forward, and I think as we've determined, they have a little bit of room closer to the water.
All right, that doesn't answer my question. My question is, if he walked in with the plans, I'm going to build that house tomorrow.
There's nothing on the
Nothing
property.
on that lot. Where would that be?
I believe we would draw the same average shoreline setback line. It's the predominant setback across multiple properties.
So
it's not just a straight line from the corner of house A to the corner of house B.
All that happens is the average is not taken, if the house wasn't there, then the average shoreline setback only takes into account the houses that are there. So to answer John's question, I mean, you take that average shoreline setback and then set the structure accordingly.
Now, I see, okay, it has to line up with the houses that are on along the waterfront. Okay, does this house line up with the houses along the waterfront?
Generally, yes, and there's a little bit of additional room in terms of that's that extra, the about 10 feet that we determined was where the line is.
So you're saying that if you go from north to south, that the house with the site would be, the township would place that exactly where it's at today.
We would allow it. Where it was actually placed is ultimately up to the owner, but yeah.
But he could build that house again right
Yes.
where it is.
In my opinion, absolutely, yes. Here, let me try one more. Let me show you the actual figure in your ordinance, or is it an exhibit, Gary?
It's a figure. It's in.
There it is.
That's just one more problem with the ordinance, that it's inconsistent.
So the idea is that it's the predominant setback.
Yeah.
You can see that there are homes forward and across it, which is kind of the situation we have here. There isn't just a nice, easy, exact straight line along the water side of these homes. There's a lot of variation to it, which, again, is why we came up with what we did.
Well, yeah, and that's what makes it tough to look at a picture, because you're talking the average, not the what's exactly there.
I don't know if that helps
Yeah.
answer the question.
No. Oh, kind of.
Well,
Go ahead, John.
But, okay, the shoreline is uneven.
Correct. Yeah, it's not a perfect science.
Well, it's not a perfect
I mean,
science, which ultimately is what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
What? How did, Brian, you and Mr. Serb disagreed on the number and location of the houses used to determine the setback?
Not at all. This is completely new information you were presented with tonight.
Okay.
The depiction on the plans provided were the result of a meeting with myself, township staff, and the contractor for the project. That was where we did our best to come up with what we felt was a reasonable replication of the line so that the contractor could then know where his boundaries were.
And as I sit here and look at the data as presented, there is no actual relationship to the shoreline and the setback. In other words, if the shoreline were curvilinear, we would still base the setback on the houses.
Correct. It's the placement of the homes in relation. A meandering shoreline doesn't make our job any easier.
Correct.
But again, the idea is kind of that line. It was never intended to be a mathematical equation of an actual average of multiple shoreline setbacks.
Brian, when you take the average, you take like a particular house. You take the shoreline, and then you measure that shoreline and the distance, and the distance from that shoreline to that house.
No.
It's the houses.
It's the corner of the house.
It's essentially the line of the homes. The exhibit or figure that I just had up on the screen was my intent to kind of show you how we work.
A setback to me means that it's set back from the shoreline. The house is set back from the shoreline a certain distance.
In line with the established development patterns of that area.
The houses are the determinant factor, not the
Yeah,
shoreline.
but if you only had one house,
Yes.
what would the shoreline setback?
That house.
That house.
It would be that house.
If you had two houses, it would be, if they didn't line up, it would be the average of those
The
two.
average of two. That's what I'm saying. So basically, I mean, what the township probably to get this line that you establish on the drawing that we have A100, that's what you did, didn't you? I mean, how did you come up with that line, that dotted line?
Yeah, again, there's the aerial that I had in my presentation is the document that we used to identify, again, to the best of our abilities, to identify where we felt that line was. And that's based on
So it's not exact.
multiple
It's not an
homes.
exact science. I guess my whole feeling here
Never
is,
has been.
Yeah, and my
You guys
whole
have been doing
feeling
this
here
for
is
20
that you've got
years.
such a. I mean, the 2 foot whatever inches is a very minimal
2.3 feet.
So I mean, in order, I mean, basically, when you're looking at the inexact science of the shoreline setback and then that minimal distance, I'm looking at it as what can we say about it that would help alleviate or make the situation better, so that the variance would be met. And I don't know. I mean, it's a situation where I feel comfortable that what I see before me is okay.
So I do think, Mr. Chair, I think there's an opportunity here to essentially look at the line of demarcation that was decided upon and then applied to the site plan, or if you feel more comfortable with the information that the homeowner has presented that's on your screen now, if you feel like that's a more representative line, albeit we're talking inches or maybe a couple of feet at this point. I mean, The reality of the situation is, based on what we had determined that township staff agreed upon and what was drawn on the plans, they need a modest variance.
Right.
Based on what's shown on the screen, it's my understanding that they wouldn't need a variance at all if, in fact, the determination and the township staff agreed that the line is a couple feet closer to the water.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask, I agree with John. I read the drawing as 11.3, not 12.4. Is that?
The site plan shows 12.4.
I know.
That's what it's based on. So I'm gonna always give you the most. If there's inconsistencies in the plans, we're gonna go with the most excessive.
Just saying there appears to be a discrepancy.
Site plan shows 12.4. The ground level has a number that's out to 12.8.
Yeah.
The upper level then goes 11.3. I mean, I think the
ground level is 12.8.5.
Yeah. That's not the issue. It's the next drawing.
That's the actual.
That's the
ground concrete.
That's the ground concrete.
That's the ground.
So that's not germane. It's the next sheet.
Right. The upper balcony
Says 11.3.
says 11.3.
So do you actually have an overhang from the ground to the upper porch? Is there an overhang there?
Well, no, but where the posts are, holding it, how much past the post?
A matter of inches, because it's the crown molding.
So the depiction on here is pretty accurate, where you could look at it and say, well, according to this, it's 11.3.
Correct.
Okay, so that makes it even less an imposition into the shoreline setback. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, question. The first floor, okay. Tell me exactly what that is. Is that a screened-in porch? What is it? Is it
No,
walled
I'm
in?
glad you asked. Yeah, it's an open-aired porch. We will have family dinners out there in the summer, and that is all.
Okay, well then,
Would it be like your
you can see through it.
That is why I provided that today. That's exactly the intent right there.
So it's a screened-in porch.
Not screen. No screen. No screen.
Open.
It's
Open. It's an open.
the first floor.
The first floor is open.
Slab on grade.
Just a slab. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Brian.
Linda?
Yes, thank you. If these architectural drawings did not show a balcony, would there be a variance required for the concrete porch at 12 foot 4 inches?
No.
Okay,
Not
so
at grade.
at 11 foot 3, you're 1 foot 3 inches beyond what the variance says you can have. So if you were to cut back the balcony to 10 feet, you'd be all set, wouldn't you?
Correct.
Why don't you do that?
Well, and that's a great question. So this home faces west, and we have the canal behind us, and it's more of a bay where we are, and we get pounded with sun. It reflects not only directly into our house, but off the water. And the intent here is, although 12 feet, we have that number, It's been severely studied to make sure that we can have a table and chairs to have family dinner on this porch. And by reducing that, we'll reduce the shade protection as well as the functionality of the porch, because now the columns are that much further in from there.
Yeah, John?
Okay, I'm looking at drawing A104. Okay, A104 shows what I view as the cement pad that the porch goes on.
Concrete.
The concrete pad. Concrete pad. I don't see any posts or anything beyond 6 feet out from the side of the building. Okay, how is that going to be constructed? Can you tell me that? I mean, what I'm hearing is that basically this is all open. If I was standing over here and I'm looking right straight through your porch.
Yeah, so this drawing that you have, I want to be very clear, I don't have this, but these columns are not anywhere where they should be. This column should be here, this column should be here. Okay. And if you look at the...
Look at the next. Let's look at the next.
Can we put this,
105.
put this up on the screen, please? I think everybody needs to see this.
105 is a better depiction, I think.
I think it is too. You would line your columns up vertically.
Right.
I think all that is
So
it's just the cement.
Yeah.
He's showing 105, John?
He's showing,
Are you showing 105 or 104?
okay, 104. Okay, my point. Okay, the point. What you're making is the posts that are shown there and there aren't there. They're up there in the corner and aligned with the rest of the building. And the balcony over the top of it now is supported by those posts.
Correct.
There is nothing between the post at the back of the building with that from the front. It's wide open.
Correct.
Which means visibility is totally unrestricted.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's look at the next drawing. Okay, this is the balcony. Look at the way the posts are positioned there. My guess is it shows 11 feet 3 inches. Okay, you wouldn't build a porch or a balcony over a porch and have the post not in line with the support structure of the balcony.
That'd be a huge cantilever.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah,
What I'm suggesting here is that the cement is actually the 12 foot 4 inches, and that it is retracted and it's actually at 11.3 inches all the way straight down, and it's wide open in the middle. That's what I'm interpreting from these drawings.
Yeah, and well, but to John's point, I'm also getting up to speed on that too, because these are drawings that I have not seen, and I would tell you that this column is not here, and quite frankly, this column is not here because that just eliminates the functionality and really
The openness that you wanted.
neither here nor there.
So, John, no construction has been done on this.
No, they've only started
so
to
the
tear it
question
up.
is, where's the designer? Does the designer know what's going on here?
Yeah, and I do as well. I think these must have been submitted to the city, and then there was definitely a rendering, but the dimensions haven't changed. There must have been some.
So if it changes, those columns would change to what? To 11 foot 3, or would that be where the columns would go? And on A104, we're showing 12 foot 8 and a half. So the columns wouldn't go all the way out to 12 foot 8 and a half. They'd go out to 11 foot whatever.
Right, the columns would be recessed. That is correct.
To 11 foot whatever. I mean,
because you have your dental
to
molding,
match the
small soffit, and then
upper
column.
patio, upper deck.
Yes, sir.
Which actually lessens the impact on the.
So, Mr. Chairman, John, can I just ask, is the picture pretty accurate?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I keep going back to.
I actually had not seen, these big prints. I don't have these, but I know the intent, and that's why I'm doing
Yeah,
it.
the picture is accurate.
I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question?
John.
But he's going to span this.
Hold on.
Okay.
We have a question over here.
All right.
Hey, John.
I showed the pictures of what's on the side of that. There's pine trees and
Yes, sir.
bushes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Brian showed that. All right, those are on your property, based
Yes.
on what I saw. Okay, is there any objection if to maintain those, to make sure that those stay, or if they die, that they're replacements? It would be a condition of potentially approval if the ZBA approves it.
Great question. So Mr. Mike Kazmarek and I spoke specifically about this. They have been neighbors for 33 years and extended family. We have agreed that they have to come down because they're going to die as soon as we put a shovel in the ground. And then once everything is completed, he will determine if he wants me to put arborvitaes up or not. If he might like the open air, he may want to cover them, and that'll be on my dime.
Perfect answer. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, while we're on that
Brian.
subject, I guess I want to make some clarifications for the owner and the board too. Replanting those trees is in a location that your ordinance would not allow plantings. So I think if the intent is that either you want the option, you have a clear vision triangle where no screen plantings are allowed in waterfront yards.
So they basically need a variance for that?
No, they're allowed to remain. Existing vegetation can remain.
If they took them out.
If they took them out and wanted to replant.
And the neighbor wanted them replaced.
They would find themselves back in front of ZBA unless.
Because that house is next to Serb's house. It would impact that clear vision triangle.
Correct.
So those arborvitae would impact the vision.
If I may, if a condition were attached to a favorable decision that required screen plantings to some degree in that area, then I would deem essentially that to be met and allowed as a requirement of this body without the need to come back for variance. But absent some type of a condition that says ZBA granted a variance but required screen plantings, then I would say if they are removed, then I would say they could not go back up absent a variance. So hopefully that makes sense.
I understand what you said.
I'm glad someone does.
But I'm sitting close to them, that's
Makes
why.
me feel a little bit better.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the board?
Oh, just maybe a recap, Brian. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. The way I understand it, there's no neighbors that care. I mean, they all approve of this, I think. And your figure shows there's a variance required, but with new data, John's figures show there isn't a requirement. And I just wanted to ask you, is it possible with the new data you could agree that it doesn't need a variance? Or if you guys went back and studied it a little more, it might not need a variance?
So, yeah, what I would do is I'm not the one that makes the call. I don't have decision-making authority in this township. Township staff, Tony Gray in particular, would be the one who would make the call. I am happy to take the new data back, and we can certainly have that conversation, and if it is deemed compliant, then they do not need a variance.
So how would that get done with the applicant ask for that?
So we can do, I mean, what I guess, I don't know that we could table to the next meeting, and we could reevaluate. If it's determined a variance is not needed, the petitioner could withdraw the request and we would be done. If it's determined that, no, I'm sorry, we still think you have a 2-foot encroachment, then we would present this back to you next month as essentially.
Or actually, based on the drawings here, maybe less than 2 because the 11.3, which could be cleared up also.
I definitely think there's some room for some additional discussion. I don't know what a potential 1-month delay does to the petitioner's project or not. I'm not sure if that's a huge issue at this point in time, or I mean,
if I could here,
please.
Would you mind if I just borrowed that one drawing from you?
It's in there.
I don't want to take everybody's time up this evening. We can wrap this up very shortly. But to that point, I think Brian brings up a great highlight, and I'm happy to review that with Tony as far as the line is concerned. And as I said, I think this is a more accurate way to depict the average shoreline setback than drawing a marker and trying to scale it from a ruler. The computer, generally speaking, is more accurate. But that aside, this first proposal, line I've shown you is the most conservative approach to the average shoreline setback. This second line shown here goes out one house further than what I just showed you on the prior screen. And it gets better. Of course, to some of your point, if you wanted to rewrite the average shoreline setback bylaws, this shows Elba Island almost in its entirety and goes all the way south. And if you pick up the southernmost house, and that's 10 houses south of mine, and you go 10 houses north, excluding outliers, which there are a few. Here, and then of course it comes back down. Now I have 40 feet for an average shoreline setback. And to everyone's point here tonight, I don't think a variance is necessary. I think it's more of if we can go back and speak with the township to just get a more accurate number, I think this will fall inside of it. The neighbors are comfortable with it as well, and I think it's a fair and reasonable approach.
So I would say we table it, because obviously if you can work it out, you're done. We know you don't have to come back. However, if you do need to come back, we still can have you on the docket.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, thanks, John.
I would like to propose a bit of a different direction, okay? I think that we should not drag the applicant back here. I think that, at least from my perspective, I'm going to make a motion that this be approved. It be approved for the following reasons. Number one, there's ambiguity in the waterfront setback. We're talking about a very minor setback variance and trying to distinguish it from homes of whether it's next door or two houses down, doesn't really matter. You can't see the difference. That's number one. So there's ambiguity there. Number two, the construction is such that it's open. The visibility is not a factor on an open porch. Number three, there is screening that is there right now that the applicant, with board approval, would allow to be replanted if the neighbor to the north wants, without a variance. Okay, all of this to me suggests that we approve it. Now, if I for one prefer to follow the standard processes that Brian lays out as to how you calculate waterfront setback. Okay, I don't like the idea of going 16 houses one direction or the other. Follow the standard process. The standard process is where I would want to be. So I would simply like to go ahead and vote and have a motion to approve this for the reasons as I stated.
Okay, John. Yeah.
Just tell him to make his motion.
Yeah, I agree with John. That, in fact, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, because I felt the same way as you did. So with that, I think we can entertain a motion.
Well, he's made a motion, I think.
Was that a motion, John?
That was a motion.
I support it.
We have support.
Yeah, I would support it. I just wanted to...
all in favor?
John has a comment.
Oh, John?
Make sure he understands that
Yeah.
he still can postpone. It's my purpose was not to get him to postpone it, but it's his decision.
But there's a risk.
There's a risk, obviously, with us taking a vote.
That's the only reason.
No, yeah, I think the documentation here today supports it. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, so you're comfortable with that, John?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let's go forward with the motion then. We got a motion, we got support. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the appeal is approved. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
With the conditions.
Yeah, there are conditions. Yeah.
With the conditions of the screening with your neighbor's approval.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Although you hear that everybody sounds like that was my only thing. I didn't want to put him in jeopardy. But good job.
Okay, we...
We're not...
Are we done?
no, we're not done. I just want to get them, if we have any comments or miscellaneous items to cover. Lori, is there anything that you want to cover? Nothing? Do we have anything next month? Nothing? Okay. So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, a meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Right.